Welcome to the Funeral Services and African Heritage panel discussion. We're talking about a grim topic, a very scary topic to some of us, but a very necessary topic, because as certain as it is, the sun will rise and set, somebody's going to die. And when somebody dies, there must be an undertaker to come and take over and give the person a dignified send-off. My name is Victor Homweswan, and we are talking to 4 practitioners. Everyone on this panel knows the industry, not from reading about it in the book, not from having a family member buried. They know it from being practitioners. They're either funeral directors, entrepreneurs, members of associations, and they're going to share with us how the heritage, the African heritage, can be teamed up or dovetailed with commercialization. What are the skills that you need to be in this industry? How is the industry made up? What are the subdivisions? What is the value chain like? Can you really make a decent, dignified living out of funerals? And what are the cultural nuances you must be mindful of when you run a business, when you aim to get into the industry, when you aim to be a supplier to this funeral services industry? So we have a very powerful panel, starting with, on my left, if I may say, from Icebo to funerals, but she's here representing the South African Funerals Association, SAFPA, is that right? Her name is Nomfundo Mkoi. Welcome.
Good morning.
All right. And then we have next to him, again from another association, this time the National Funeral Practitioners Association of South Africa. They are otherwise called NAFUPA. And his own business is BJ Funerals. He is none other than Muzi Shemwa. Welcome. Thank you very much. And on my left, right here, all the way from the Val, from Sidibeng, Konyana Funeral, but he is with the National Funeral Directors Association, NFDA.
That's correct.
That's Lawrence Konyana. Welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, extreme right, from Bayou Funeral Services, but representing the United Funeral Directors Association, UFDA, we have John Starr.
Thank you.
All right. So where do we start? Let's start with you, Mr. Shemwa, because you represent the association. But somebody listening out there, a young person thinking of funerals. I know funerals only when a family member is deceased and they have to be buried. You are telling me this is a much bigger industry than that. Sketch for us how big it is and what are the different divisions.
Yeah, this is a very lucrative industry, for one may say.
Lucrative.
We all business people at the end of the day.
Okay.
Look, it's divided into 2 folds, but what I'm going to focus on right now is the burial and cremation side, which constitutes about 12 billion in the economy of this country. You know, we contribute 12 billion as undertakers. Actually, we're contributing much more than that, because there's this other side, which is your insurance side. When we speak of the insurance side, we're speaking of the underwriting, your burial societies, you know, as Abo Mama Emakaya are conducting. And we have your, the churches who are playing quite a crucial role in ensuring that our people are buried at the end of the day when the time comes. We also have, on the burial side, we can divide it into many sectors.
Yep.
You have your suppliers, those who are supplying us with coffins. You have your florists, they're supplying us with flowers. You know, even water these days is playing quite a good role in the funeral undertaking business. So it's no longer like before, when you remove the body, store and bury. We do deco, we do catering. Last week I got a call from one of the ladies who said they want to provide us with the service, a post-funeral stress disorder kind of a service that will offer to our clients. You know, they want to give them a body massage, they want to give them counseling, because after the funeral, when everybody's gone, you are left alone.
That's when the reality of
Exactly.
hits home.
Exactly. So I know that when people think of funeral, all of them want to become undertakers. You know, in fact, there are quite a number of people that are working with us. Some of them, they're supplying us with fleets. For example, if you are burying, let's say, 100 people a week, you can't have 100 Range Rovers to use as a family car. Where are you going to park them?
No wonder you said lucrative. You told me the Range Rovers here.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, our youngsters can take an opportunity here, you know, and supply us with vehicles. We don't want our own vehicles. All we want to do is to conduct funeral services.
What I'm hearing you say is, if you love flowers, for example, you love just growing flowers, you can start your own garden of flowers and just tend to them, because every weekend there's a funeral, and somehow the undertakers or the funeral directors will know about you, and you can supply flowers. It doesn't have to be grim. If you like cars, you can also find a way of, and even not cars for supplying them, washing them afterwards, and so on. And now you're talking about the side of water. Somebody might just be bottling water and branding them, because what I find is that the bottles become branded and messages are written on there. And the doves, all of a sudden, people are releasing doves into the sky.
They actually are hiring doves out.
How do
we
they get those
we
doves?
hire them. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
Because
they
they
teach
fl-
them.
they fly?
They fly and they fly back home, so that when you come next week, you use the same doves. No, look, at the end of the day, the industry now is very much open. You know, even people who are involved in fashion, the fashion designers, are making money here, because you find some customers who come to us and specify, I am looking for black for my family this weekend. Can you assist me? You see, so everybody now is like getting an opportunity to participate in the funeral business without becoming an undertaker at the end of the day.
Wow. I'm still battling with buying an outfit for a funeral. But I realize that people actually do that. They don't wear the same outfit to a funeral. And the bigger the funeral, the bigger the outfit.
And yeah, it is. You know, sometimes they will say to us, we want orange. The whole family wants orange. Even with the vehicles, customers will specify. They will say, we want white Range Rovers, we want black SLK, whatever they want, we must provide.
I've yet to understand how that is. But we're not arguing with the market here. We are saying there are people out there, they want certain things to go with their funerals, and you must be ready to provide them. And if you're thinking about supplying services, you have so many things to choose from. Let's go to Lawrence here and just talk about, no, not Lawrence, John first. Just applying the fundamentals of business, listening to Muzi as he talks about how many services and supplies are there. So he said lucrative. And then the more he speaks, the more I remember the kind of funerals I see, the more I understand he's actually right. It's a lucrative industry. Applying the basics of business is not negotiable. You still have to know about that. Talk to us about that.
Look, the funeral business is like any other business. It has to be managed properly. It has to be financed properly and all of that. In fact, making it attractive to young people is a key part of what we're doing as the associations and the Funeral Federation. From the Federation side, just to add something, from the Federation side, we've partnered with NASPERS recently, who are looking to place 300 graduates within funeral businesses. Now, that is to show that the funeral industry should be attractive to young people that are studying. Finance graduates, marketing and sales graduates, IT graduates. There are aspects of business that are required in there. Funeral business as it is requires marketing, it requires proper financial management. Without all of those aspects, as with any business, if you don't run it properly, if you don't manage it properly, if you don't keep a tab on your finances, it's not going to succeed. It's not going to be, you're not going to be successful as a business. So those fundamentals are important. There's a front office and a back office to the funeral industry. The front office is customer facing. That's where we do all the arrangements. That's where we do all of the management of the business. That's where we make sure that from the burial side and from the funeral insurance side as well, all services are covered by our business. There's a back office. It's not the sexiest back office that we have,
No.
but it is there.
No, it's not. Actually, I don't want to see the back office.
But like with any business, it has a front and a back office, and there's
But
skills
what happens,
required.
What happens in the back office? I mustn't trivialize.
That in the back office is where the actual bodies are handled. The storage requirement is there. The services of casketing, of dressing bodies, and making sure that you prepare them for a dignified funeral. That you prepare them for the family to be able to view their loved one. Remember, this is the last time that they're viewing them, right. So it has to be a presentable picture. So that's what the back office entails, and there are skills that go with that as well.
So is what happens from the moment the person is certified dead? In fact, sometimes even before they are
certified dead, we would have to pick them up.
So the time they come and show up, and all of the mourners are there, looking at decent casket or a coffin,
Yes.
and the person is dressed. That part you are saying is not attractive at all.
It's not. There are people that enjoy it. There are people that enjoy doing that. There are people that study. You've got embalmers,
Yeah.
and you've got beauticians can come into the funeral industry as well, where makeup is required. On the deceased person. So it's not. A lot of people find it, a bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
But it is a service that is required, and it's actually that service that distinguishes a good funeral home and a good funeral director from a bad one.
You've just come from the COVID era. Well, we are still in it.
We're still in it.
Although we are no longer having the euphoria of wrapping people in plastic and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Surely doing a funeral under COVID, the back office was even more difficult to manage. Did it increase the cost of running a business or delivering the service to the customers?
It definitely increased the cost because remember, although safety is a prerequisite in the industry, whether we have COVID or not, but it was more increased during COVID times. You had to make sure that transmission between employees and family members and those kind of things is minimized. I think the initial reaction was a bit high because we didn't know. It was a new situation, and when government placed regulations, I think they placed those regulations given the Ebola experience. So there was a bit of over-regulation in terms of what's required. But as we learned what was going on and the risks of transmission from deceased persons, those got reduced a bit. But yes, increasing PPE, increasing safety levels, increasing training of our back office staff was important, and it does increase business costs.
Let's go to Lawrence here. Lawrence, you grew up in the family, in the business of funerals. Your parents were in the business. You've now taken over. Talking about COVID and many other things, the cultural preferences of especially Africans when it comes to burying someone, from how long it takes before you bury them to what you do at the funeral. And suddenly we are finding all these changes coming in. COVID imposed its own, but the young people doing parties at cemeteries and all those. How do you, when you run a business, make sure you keep a vibrant, growing business in such an industry?
Well, thank you. I think it's, like you said, I grew in I'm what you call a funeral baby. That's what they call us.
What a figure of speech.
Where you were raised in a hearse, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So your parents picked you up from school in a hearse sometimes?
Most definitely, yes.
Oh, no.
And even at times when my mother was driving a hearse, she would give me to the priest to handle while she drives. So, hence
man.
that's why we're called funeral babies. So I'm basically a second generation.
By the way, just before you even talk about that, running a funeral business in the African community also came with its own stereotypes and urban legend. Share with us some of the urban legends and stereotypes you had to overcome.
No, definitely. I think even in our earlier conversation, I highlighted to you that, when I was growing up, even at school, when they ask, what does your father do? Or what kind of a business is involved? You even scared to say a funeral parlor, or it was popularly known as a mortuary. I think that was the common name, a mortuary. And as soon as you say a mortuary, everyone sort of steps back from you and says, okay. And there'll be stories to say, so your father drives around in a black car. A black Marais, they used to call it. And I saw him chasing me last night. I saw him driving around at night. Those were the kind of stories that we had to grow into. And you get scared. I mean, even when I went to secondary, at times when I was asked, what do your parents do? And you end up saying, a supermarket.
And hope they don't ask what supermarket.
Exactly. and you hope you don't get picked up with a hearse because you'll be exposed.
How did your parents explain getting into the business in the first place?
Well, for my parents, I think it was for them, my father was a carpenter by trade. And, we had a lot of, where he stayed at the time, we had people coming from different areas, like coming from the Eastern Cape and all those areas. And often he would get requests that, can you make me a coffin? So that's how we started, and he would make that coffin. And because he had one of those old Bedford buckies, they will ask him, please transport this body of ours to the Eastern Cape. It was called Transkei at the time, and he would do that. And he slowly got into that. But because he was married, he had a wife, and when he goes out to take that body to the Eastern Cape, she had to be busy at home. So that's how she started learning to make coffins. So she started making coffins in that way. That's how she got involved. So she will make coffins, he will transport.
Except now they have become very expensive, these coffins. And it's a cultural thing also, because you're not going to bury me in a box of tomatoes, are you?
Definitely.
That preference to have a dignified funeral, and often conflating dignified with expensive.
Definitely. That's why I always say, funerals have become more like weddings. It's an event, and, at the wedding, it's either you're going to have a shabby wedding, or it's going to reflect who you are. So as funerals, I mean, if you get even people who don't have money, but they want something, what in their eyes they perceive as decent and expensive. And sometimes decent goes with price, unfortunately. And that's how it has evolved over time. If you see what's happening now, even when COVID came in, at the start, people were not buying expensive coffins during COVID. And why? Because their funerals were limited to numbers. And they would always say, why should I buy expensive coffin if we're not going to have a lot of people there? And as soon as we got used to the idea of numbers, and there people break rules, people come to funerals, their numbers started increasing, we started buying expensive coffins. And other things start as well. Before, like that John has alluded to, the cost went up. Initially you would use the PPE that you would wash and they can be reused. And then all of a sudden it means everything has to be disposable. So now it came to even the catering. You had to do a different type of catering where the dishes and whatever utensils will be disposed of. So things are changing, and fortunately or unfortunately, in our country we still have huge funerals, unlike in the UK and other countries where it's just 10 people or something.
And now we have to invite people to funerals because we need to verify who they are, and we can trace them afterwards, contact tracing, and inform them if there's that kind of evolution is a topic I want to take to the next panel member. Nomfundo, you do those funerals, and I don't want to restrict your business to that, but you have done very famous funerals of late, high profile. When you hear about the evolution, what would you say are some of the evolutions that have happened, the transformation that has taken place in the funerals industry to what it is today and what it could become in the future?
There's been a lot of change in the funeral industry. When I look at funerals 10 years ago, when I look at what we're doing now, it's totally different. Now funerals are events. People look forward to the funeral. There's a register because the numbers have been reduced to 50. Then another time it was about hundreds. So there had to be a register. There had to be a sitting plan. Who's going to sit here? You know, just imagine at a funeral, there's your name on the seat that we know that you're going to sit here. We had to do COVID screening, making sure that everyone who comes in, we check temperature and all of that, something that was not done before. So there's a lot that's being done, as well as also with time. People are no longer having night vigils, and with time as well, they're limited to 2 hours, something that was not done before. But families still break rules a bit, but there's been a lot of change in how the funerals are conducted. Technology itself, funerals are being watched on YouTube, Facebook, because of the numbers. So you find that, like my colleague was saying, people were not choosing like high-end caskets because they were worried that there'll be a few people at the funeral. Some they would choose even higher ones because high-end caskets, because the funeral will be viewed on TV. The decor we see at the funerals now, it's like a wedding. People look for, events people now, events where during lockdown they were stopped. But people, they found another way of doing that decor at funerals. Something that was not there. Catering, people look forward to the menu. You must see the setup at the catering, just after the funeral. People would even complain that there's no dessert. How can you ask for dessert at a funeral? That's how they've changed, honestly. There's a lot of change, even with fleets. People worry about how many family cars are going to be there. And those family cars, who's going to... they have a list of people that are going to sit in family car 1, family car 2. It's what you see at these funerals.
It becomes a source of serious conflict.
Exactly.
Who goes into which car?
I've seen people fighting over seats at a funeral because one said the seat was allocated to somebody else. They had to move that. That's how things have changed, something that was not there.
Some of these changes, sorry to interrupt, some of these changes are temporary and they are specific to COVID. But I'm more interested in those that will, after COVID, still be there relative to 10 years ago, because you mentioned dessert, you mentioned, and I know different parts of South Africa are different. On the coast, I find funerals take longer and they go on until around 3 in the afternoon. In areas like Pretoria, for example, they end very quickly, but the Vicinions, which happens afterwards, can go to the next day. It becomes a big party. I'm more interested in those changes because they affect the cost, and to you as the funeral undertaker, what you're offering and how you package it.
What the changes I've seen in our industry, there's been a lot of transformation, even with the products that we offer. People are more interested at what am I getting now? I'm paying for a policy with you for 5 years. No one has died, but I'm just putting my money to you. What am I getting?
Right.
What value? So we've changed a lot in our products. We're offering now rewards programs, things that would benefit people while they live.
Wow.
Yes, those are the changes that I've seen. And also, there's been a lot of transformation as well with gender. You see a lot of females now are getting into the funeral industry. Myself, I'm there. There's a few that are coming in. And not just coming in, they're holding positions as well in the industry, big positions. So other changes that I've noticed in our industry with systems. Before, people would just do manual receipting and all of that. There's been a lot of technology applied. There are policy management systems that will help in managing the books for underwriters and for the business itself. So there's a lot of changes that I noticed.
As a woman, if you don't mind sharing some of your experiences. Are we allowed to say which funerals you ran?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
one or
I
two.
mean, you ran the funeral of His Majesty, the King, the late King Goodwill Zwelithini. That's not a, that's a whole country to run on its own. And not because anybody is particularly difficult, but just the essence of the Zulu nation, the traditions, what happened, and he had been reigning for decades, which means it was a long time people could remember what a monarch would be buried like. Many people were born after his father had been buried, which means they didn't know, but they were grown up and they had an opinion on how things should be done. And here you are bringing a woman in the kingdom of KwaZulu to bury His Majesty. Tell me your experience there, because I'm sure it would have been, and then there were people who were saying we're going to defy this COVID restrictions, and then there was an interest in the succession at the same time. Share with us what being in the middle of such a storm could be like.
Yeah, burying Ukutala Isilo
Yes.
was one of our biggest funerals we've ever done. As a brand, it wasn't an easy one. There were a lot of cultural things to take care of. How you even, being a woman myself, I had to make sure that I don't even come close to where the king was, but at least I had staff organizing the entire funeral of the Isilo. Oh, it came with a lot of cultural beliefs and rituals, things
Did
that
you
were
have to
done.
appoint a special account manager just to deal with this particular account?
As in finance.
No, as in
or
the
to
person dealing with the
deal-
client.
Oh yes, definitely. We fortunately I've got an exco.
Right.
One of our exco members was key because he's male. I had to make sure, because honestly, as you're saying, it wasn't easy for me as a woman to be trusted with that. But I love that before His Majesty passed on, we had to bury the prince. So he endorsed us from burying the prince, and he was happy with our work, which made it easy for us, even the family, the royal family, to choose us Ukutala Isilo himself, because he was happy before. I saw transformation in our king just by allowing me to bury even the prince and show, be grateful for our work. And then when we burying him, it was sort of a little bit easier on some things because we knew from the prince, but it's no child's joke, I promise you.
No, it didn't look like a joke. It had a lot of dimensions. And remember, as an African, not being Zulu myself, but taking an interest in the monarchy, because it's one of the few monarchs in Africa that are still recognized and respected. So it doesn't matter whether you subject yourself, but you have to respect that. So whatever happened around the succession, around the burial, became important to me in that regard. Talking about offering something, and John or Muzi, you can answer this. The point about people wanting to get value while they are alive, that's a subject I truly treasure, because there's a lot of money that goes into funeral plans, funeral insurance, and I always wish there could be investment to go with it. Are we going to get there one day, you believe, Muzi, that investing in a decent funeral, because I don't see people saying, I don't want a decent funeral, but to invest for 60 years and live not getting any benefits, it's something that's going to make the industry a garage purchase?
Actually, we are there already. We are already offering benefits that one can enjoy while still alive, and such as if you haven't made a claim for 5 years, as my colleague have indicated before, we have a certain amount that we pay back to you. It's called a cashback. Then we also have policies that have an element of a small educational plan or education plan within it. So where your children could benefit by getting monies for, I mean, like, even though it's not a large amount that could pay your school fee, but it assists with your uniform, it assists with your stationaries and stuff. So there are actually such benefits that comes with your policy.
I'm very encouraged. I must be frank, I didn't know about this because I hate anybody calling me about a funeral cover. I just hate it. I just hang up immediately. But that could be a mistake because you are saying to me already there's the thinking. And I'm happy that it comes from the associations and it's more Africans that are talking about this. Because you know more than anybody what a funeral can do to a family. And we don't think beyond the funeral. We worry about the funeral up to that level. And you're saying we have tipped the scales, John, in recognizing that the funeral is but an event in a series of chain of events that cannot just be the end in its own.
It has to be. It has to be, as Ms. Mkoy was saying. You can't have people just making contributions for waiting for some eventuality. There has to be a benefit. There has to be an ongoing benefit. People have to see that that relationship, that value relationship has to be. It has to be, seen while people are alive. They've got to understand what it is that they're contributing, what it is that they're getting back from the business. And if the funeral industry doesn't provide that, then yes, you're right, it will be a grudge purchase.
So we will get to the point where people can come together as an investment club, and in addition to an investment club, they can add a funeral benefit. Now it becomes an appendage instead of the main thing. What about cremation? Things like cremation that are not particular or could be at odds with our culture. How are we doing in that department? And the unavailability of land, which makes it difficult to find burying people on top of the other, etc., multiple use of the grave. What are the trends and what's the prognosis?
Well, I think if you look at, amongst Africans, and I mean maybe black Africans, cremation wasn't really popular.
It still scares me.
It still scares a lot of people. Sometimes it even scares us undertakers. And I think when you check in the past 3-4 years, there's been quite a number of black people who choose cremation.
Simplify it for me. Simplify it for me. You take this body here, which is 70% water if I go by my high school biology, so I could shrink into quite a significant bit. But if you roast me, I'm going to fit into a matchbox. What is the practice? What happens to the ashes? Because I've heard of them being sprinkled on the ocean. I've heard of them being kept at home. What is the story there? It's creepy to me to think about my ashes floating around the ocean or being kept in some closet.
Well, technically, actually, you get more than a matchbox size of.
I'm dramatizing. I'm dramatizing.
Of ashes.
It's true business.
And I think this is sometimes the problem because, in many cultures where cremation is the thing, like in your Eastern countries,
yes,
the ashes will be scattered in the ocean or in the water. And with us, recently, about I think a month ago, I buried my uncle who chose to be cremated because he felt there isn't enough burial space. And he doesn't want someone coming to look for his grave where they don't find it because he couldn't find his own parents' grave. And there was that confusion. What do we do with the ashes now? Do we keep them in the house?
Yes.
Or do we bury them? In most cases, in every cemetery, there are ash ashes where people would bury those ashes. But there are some family that kept them. And personally, I said, I think if you cremated them, I think you should keep the ashes. Why not? Then his presence can always be in the house. If you want your ancestors close to you, that's a brilliant way of keeping ashes.
I'm just thinking of an accident. People break into houses, man. You don't want them stealing my ashes.
Well, I think a couple of years there was some celebrity. There was I don't know if it was a rumor or what, but apparently they were selling ashes and they thought it was spices and they used them to cook with.
Shoot me now. But now you understand where I'm going, that these are trends that blend with our cultures. I want to talk about the Vicinions culture, because it's what happens after the funeral? There's a big party there. It's a lot of expenses, But there are lots of suppliers. Remember, we're talking commercial here. We're talking young people supplying the industry. So, hey, let's not judge whether the practice is right or wrong. But let's try and see what the trends are with after the funeral, not weeks after, during, but just afterwards, because that's a big industry, isn't it?
And as the guy from Pretoria, I have to be the one answering that.
Please do, because I need to understand, how do you manage it out there? It's almost like there's a breed of people who are couples, they say we met at a Vicinions.
Yeah. I'd like to be able to come back to that cremation
Please
issue and
do.
what you do with the funerals, but let me answer your question first. The word Vicinions does originate from Pretoria.
Yes.
And it evolved from...
Vicinions means what?
Who do we
see us?
No. Who do we see afterwards? So when you're at a funeral, then the question is who do we see? Who do we go to? Where are the drinks set up, kind of thing? That's what Vicinions means. Now, essentially, it grew from that tradition to say, you find friends and family come together from far afield for a funeral, and you find that a lot of them may not have seen each other for a long time, and then once the funeral is done and everything is sorted out and organized, there'd be a neighboring house, a friend's house further on, where people would get together just as a social gathering, just getting together, seeing old friends and reminiscing about the deceased and those kind of things. And it has grown into an event on its own. You have situations where families decide there will be somebody who is allocated to organizing the Vicinions. I think in Johannesburg they call it after tears, or everybody else calls it after tears. They call it after tears, but the original name...
In the East Rand they call it washing the utensils.
Yes, so that's where it grew from, and it has in certain instances become an event on its own.
But I want to just ask, it almost like this, and I'm sharing my own anecdotal experience. Often there are people I hardly ever see except at funerals, which means the busy lifestyle today makes it difficult for people to see one another, except where they are forced to be. So I'm trying to say, is there a business in there, the networking? Because if I don't get to see my friends in this lonely, busy world, and a funeral can be a place to do it, hey, let's not criminalize it.
Yes.
Let's make it a decent offering, just like we make flowers a decent offering, just like we make cars a decent offering at a funeral.
Okay.
Is there a chance that we could evolve and go in that direction? Anyone can take this.
In funerals, people get husbands. You go with that husband, you find one. And you find even people complaining that, hey man, we're so ugly in that funeral, I didn't get anything. Because that's where we socialize, that's where we meet now. And there's a lot you can get from a funeral, honestly. I love when you speak networking. That's where business people meet. That's where people would share ideas, share business cards. Because after the funeral, when they're eating, in that case, during the lunch at the funeral, then they exchange cards. They meet other people that they haven't met. Yeah. So there's a lot of networking. There's a lot of business that you can get in those after tears.
There should be an app coming out soon. I can see an app. Yeah, that could be. What about the music? As an African, it bugs me that Africans no longer sing at funerals. But it can be a difficult thing if I'm Lutheran or this faith and the people coming don't know how to sing and our children no longer can harmonize, where you just can listen to the melody and harmonize. I did that in growing up, so it's an easy thing for me to do. Is there a chance that there are musicians out there who could specialize not at giving CDs and USBs for funerals, but be hired as part of the package that we can get a good choir that can sing the songs that are appropriate to the family or the bereaved family? Do people do that?
If you look at...
Because there are lots of idle musicians out there who could be hired at an affordable rate to do funerals?
If you look at a situation, there's brass bands that offer their services. There's there's musicians in the townships that offer their services at funerals.
Okay.
When I buried my father, I had a two-person violin.
Right.
This thing that were, well, they were part of they're in the family, but you know, it's something that we did, and they're offering the boys are offering their services to play music to this thing.
And transport to the cemetery, because try doing a funeral in Soweto when there's no COVID, you're gonna lose your way, end up going to the wrong funeral. I know in Sebokeng, was it not Sebokeng, Mangaung, I saw a situation where once you get to the point where you're finishing, taxis come around and every mourner just paid 15 rand at the time. And you had, instead of a cavalcade of 200 cars, you ended up with about 15 minibuses that take everybody to the cemetery, and they wait for them. When you're done, they take you back. No confusion. I'm asking these things because every time we go into a funeral, into a village, there are people who are unable to provide these services because it's not a common practice. Who leads these evolutions? Is it the churches, who you mentioned play a huge role? Is it the traditional leaders? Is it the funeral undertakers?
In most cases, it's the funeral undertakers,
Right.
you know, because they see the need, and sometimes the family expresses those needs, and they see a gap, and bring in the different partners to provide those kind of services.
Right. And voiceover artists, people, please help me and not give me a young child who goes to Hilton or Michael House having to read the obituary of somebody from Gwamhlawe Lingana, because I cannot hear what they are saying. I cannot hear what or who they are talking about. Where are we there with this? Because this is the story of a deceased person who could be 115 years old. They have their peers, their children, and is the last send-off. And yet I listen to this guy trying to read Itagazelo. They have no idea what they are reading. And whether they get prepared the night before or after, I don't know. What do you say to that?
Yeah, in fact, the voiceovers, over and above that, the reading is clear and all that. It saves us time. People who do voiceovers do not become emotionally and break down and cry, and they have to wait, and they have to sing while waiting for
You are an impatient undertaker. You want to get out of here.
No, I mean, it's something that is decent and something that is being done more often.
Right.
In a Zulu culture, in our tradition, if I die, you won't have a situation where my wife will stand up and speak.
No.
It doesn't work that way. But if she can write it down and somebody does a voiceover for her,
Right.
And then we play it like that. So this is a trend now. It's something that has been done more often. Maybe again to come back to the music part of it.
Yes.
We are not longer looking at your brass band and the sort of stuff. This is more.
Yeah.
Now, since there's a lockdown and we are starting a new normal now, you see Dladla Mshunqisi more at the funeral than you see him at the gigs, because there are no longer places for them to come and perform, and they use funerals to perform now and again, you know. So it's an open market, like I said before. It's a very open industry.
I'm going to give the last word to Nomfundo, but I want you to each give me a minute of your closing remarks about how you see this industry, how you see the future. Where do we start? Who wants to go first? In other words, suppose there's a young person listening, wondering, do I really want to make a career, a business out of the funerals industry? And this is you making the business case, but basing it on realities of the future. John?
As I mentioned when I started, we've partnered with NASPERS to place unemployed graduates within the funeral industry.
Good.
The purpose of that is to ensure that we make the funeral industry attractive to young people. We show that it may not be sexy, but it is a choice in terms of career career options. So instead of looking at your big funeral insurance companies, instead of looking at your corporates, you could be looking at funeral businesses within your community that can offer you a sustainable and profitable career.
Right. So when you study, look at the fields that could be linked to this. Or you have already studied, look at what your skills are, what your interest
skill
area
set
is,
yeah.
and whether it doesn't fit in with the funerals industry. How about you, Lawrence?
Well, you know, funeral industry was always viewed as a more of a morbid kind of industry.
Yes.
And from what we've discussed today, you can see it's no longer like that.
No.
You know, it's something that someone can choose to choose a career in that, and there's different facets that one could touch on. And I mean, even we were talking about cremation. I mean, there's even new forms of similar to cremation where they use water instead of fire. So it's evolving very fast, and it's something that even young people should start looking into and getting into careers into the funeral industry. I mean, a couple of years ago, we don't have mortuary schools in South Africa, basically, but we're starting to have academies that are training young people towards a career in funeral.
All right, Muzi?
Yeah, as I said before, I think what the youth of today should do is to find an angle that they can utilize. Again, I want to repeat this. We don't always have to be undertakers, all of us. Find something that you are good at. Come to us and present your ideas, because most of the changes comes like that. You know, recently, I think last night, I was with Usis Nomfundo. She was telling me about the caravan-like sort of a container whereby an undertaker provides to the family. They pull that container and offer it as a form of accommodation for people who are coming from a long distance. You know, so there is more to offer today. I mean, funerals, we arrange funerals, but there are people who specializes in coordinating the funeral. Before you attend such big funerals like Isilo and others, you'll find that there's a scope they give you. This is what we want. This is what we should provide. This is there's a tent A, in the tent A we want this kind of a deco, B, C, and all. So it is more. People can have whatever they have and offer it to us. I mean, it's an open market now.
Excellent. Nomfundo, you have the last word.
I just want to say to our youth, please, they must not get into the industry because of money, because they see it as a money-making scheme. No. There's a lot that they can benefit from in terms of careers, different careers available within the industry. But it mustn't just be about money. They must have the right qualities. They must really get into it because they have what it takes and they have, you know, they have passion for it. So we find our youth, grade 12, they register a business. They know nothing. No management skills, nothing at all.
No compassion.
No, yes, exactly. So they must make sure that if they choose to come into this industry, especially that we deal with dead people. That's not an easy one. One asked once and asked me, "How are you not scared?" I said, "What about doctors? Doctors as well. People die on their table. I mean, I just get that person dead already." So there's a lot involved in what we do.
Right, certainly. We thank Nomfundo Mtoi from Iceboletu Funerals, but she's also with SAFPA. We also had Muzi Hlengwa here, who's from BJ Funerals, but he's with NAFUPA, he's an association. Next to me, we have from Konyana Funerals. We also have Lawrence Konyana, but who represents NFDA. And last but not least, the United Funeral Directors Association, UFDA. We have John Storm from Peu Funeral Services. That's it. If you have been thinking about this as a dead industry, it's anything but dead. It's alive and well, and it is evolving, and it offers you opportunities that you haven't imagined before. Let's thank Services SETA for bringing you this roundtable, and let's hope that you have taken something out of it, and you'll be able to make the most of the funerals industry. Victor Humweswana signing off.
Sometimes as associations and as individual members of the funeral industry, we have different perspectives on different topics. And panel like this, it stimulates some of the things that you never thought of before, or brings to the fold the multifaceted business that we are in. And it's always helpful, more of these will definitely help.
The funeral industry hasn't been adapting quickly enough. The advent of COVID has moved up pace a bit. We are adapting to new technology. We're finding things that we have to do. We're adapting to new burial technologies as well. We're finding that there's more need for environmentally friendly burial techniques. And yeah, we're moving towards the future.
I think such discussions are sacrosanct. We need to have more of such discussions so that as an industry we are able to position ourselves and prepare for the future. If you can look at what happened with COVID-19, we were all caught unprepared because we never had things that were put in place in case such situations occur, or we find ourselves under the similar pandemics in the country or in the world over.
It is very important for the funeral industry to have skilled labor, skilled employees, because it professionalizes the business. Because the funeral industry, some people were not taking it seriously, but it is a business. For myself, to grow my brand, I had to do business management. The day I did that course, my business grew. Without business management, I didn't understand some of the things within the business. So it is very key that we capacitate our staff and make sure that they get the correct skills for the different jobs that they do within the business.
The scope of funeral services within Services SETA covers burials, manufacturing of tombstones, manufacturing of coffins, as well as cutting and shaping of stone. Now, within that industry, we also have qualifications that are registered. We have accredited service providers both in private and public space. When I'm talking about public space, I'm talking about the TVET colleges. We all know that TVET colleges are closer to where we are in the country. So most of those TVET colleges do have the qualifications that are within the funeral services.